Welcome to this Come to Jesus Daily Devotional. And at the moment, I'm posting only on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And please do share these devotions with anyone you think might also find them helpful. So this week, we continue our stewardship series. And today's devotion is entitled, God Has a Design for Time. Jordan Rayner, in his very helpful book, Redeeming Your Time, opens with this quote: "Increasingly, it feels like time happens to us, like we're running a race that it's impossible to win. We feel beholden to our calendars, watches, and to-do lists rather than having dominion over these tools that promised to make our lives easier and more productive. We have too much to do and not nearly enough time to do it. In short, we're swamped." That's Jordan Rayner from his wonderful book, Redeeming Your Time. And this week in our stewardship series, we're thinking about stewarding the gift of time that God has given to us. Now, if you know me, you know that I'm far from the most qualified person to speak on this subject, but we can all seek, can't we, to learn together from God and His Word about this vital subject of stewarding our time. And today we see that time is created by God and in units of days and weeks that are to be stewarded wisely for work and rest. Let's read together from Exodus 20, 8 to 11. "Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labour and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male nor female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. But he rested on the seventh day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy." So firstly, God has formulated the 7-day week. Now, there has been, as I understand, various experiments to alter the 7-day week. After the French Revolution, for example, they attempted a 10-day week called the decade, with 9 days of work and 1 for rest. Obviously didn't work. The Soviet Union trialled a 5-day and a 6-day week. None of these formats worked, and all returned to the 7-day design that God has set into creation. And in our text, we read that the 6th of the 10 commandments, the Sabbath day commandment, is the pattern of how we are to view our time. Time is broken up into a 7-day week, for which 6 are for work and 1 is for not working and resting. To steward our time according to God's design, we must seek to follow this pattern. Now, John Piper, in an article on the Lord's Day, wrote this, quote, "The week exists. That is not to be taken for granted. Days exist because that's how long it takes the earth to rotate. Months exist because that's how long it takes the moon to wax and wane. Years exist because that's how long it takes for the earth to revolve around the sun. But why do weeks exist? They do not correspond to any phenomenon in nature. The answer is the week exists because of Genesis 2, chapter 2, verse 2, quote, "And on the seventh day God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done." That's to quote John Piper. Secondly, what was the Sabbath for? The Jews under the Old Testament law of the Sabbath were to, what's it about? Firstly, rest. That's to cease regular labour on the seventh day, as we read in Exodus 29 to 10. They were to, secondly, worship. The Sabbath was to be treated as distinct and holy and devoted to God, as we read in Numbers 28, 9 to 10, Isaiah 58, 13 to 14. And finally, remember. They were to remember. The Sabbath reminded Israel that they had been freed from slavery and that they belonged to God. That's Exodus 31, 13 to 17. Thirdly, does the New Testament teach that Christians are to keep a Sabbath? Regarding how a Christian is to view the Old Testament law, Greg Allison puts it well in his book, Sojourners and Strangers. God revealed himself and his truth through the Old Testament. Any aspect of it continues to be true and thus binding on Christians unless Christ and the New Testament either explicitly or implicitly abrogate or modify it. So the New Testament never explicitly commands Christians to keep the Old Testament Sabbath law. Instead, the Sabbath is presented as pointing forward to the deeper rest that is found in Christ, as we read in Hebrews 4, 1 to 11. Additionally, many of the first Christians were Gentiles, many were slaves, meaning that observing a format of the 6-day week and a 1 day of rest, the Sabbath, was difficult and impossible. And the apostles do not impose Sabbath keeping on Gentile believers. You could read Colossians 2, 16 to 17, Romans 14, verse 5. Fourthly, the keeping of a special day of rest and worship, however, is wise. The pattern of 6 days of work and 1 day of rest established at creation and later commanded by Moses still reflects wise and godly rhythms for human life. Even if Christians differ on whether the Sabbath command itself remains binding, regular rest and worship remain good gifts from God. What about those whose work doesn't allow them to follow this pattern? Well, of course, there are some jobs, medical roles, a parent, police, pastors, whose work may not fit into this regular pattern. However, as far as possible, even those with such demands should seek to work and rest as far as possible according to this pattern. It's wise. It's wisdom from God. Additionally, when we think of stewarding our time for God's glory and our good, the keeping of a shared day of rest and worship, if at all possible, is very wise. And as far as possible, we should make meeting together for prayer and worship and communion. It's got to be of the highest priority. That's why it's so good to have a day off together to worship together. So in response, time is created by God and in the units of days and weeks that are to be used for work and rest. It's wise. It's wise to have a special day, a Sabbath, set aside from work and school, DIY, so on, so as to focus on those three elements we talked about of rest, worship, and remembrance. Are we, as far as possible, seeking to do this? Are we devoted to meeting for worship, prayer, communion, or do we allow work or other less important things to rob us of the true rest that we find in fellowship with one another and with God? All of us must beware of allowing work to enslave us or entertainment to enslave us. Alternately, are we allowing too much rest to enslave us? Are we working and resting wisely, or are we in balance? Are we in balance with our work and rest? Let's finish with Jesus' words about the goodness of the Sabbath from Mark 2, 27 to 28. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord, even of the Sabbath. God bless you.